On the morning of September 23, 1851, a hunting party in the remote Adirondack wilderness of upstate New York stumbled upon a sight that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Inside a crude log cabin, barely visible through the dense forest canopy, they found a boy of perhaps 12 years old, emaciated and wild-eyed, speaking in sounds that resembled no human language they had ever heard. The child's words flowed in strange rhythms, punctuated by clicks and guttural sounds that seemed to belong more to the animal kingdom than to any civilized tongue. What made this discovery even more disturbing was the evidence scattered throughout the cabin. Fragments of bone arranged in deliberate patterns, strange carved symbols covering every surface of the walls, and a collection of handwritten journals documenting practices that defied all Christian decency. The authorities who investigated the scene were so disturbed by what they uncovered that most records were sealed, immediately hidden away in county archives, where they remain to this day classified under a simple notation: Harwick incident access restricted by order of the state. Before we continue with the story of Benjamin Harwick and the language that should never have existed, make sure to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what state you're listening from. You might be surprised how many dark secrets your own region holds buried in forgotten archives. The discovery of Benjamin Harwick would become one of the most disturbing cases in New York State's early medical records, a testament to how isolation and desperation could transform a family into something that challenged the very definition of human civilization. The year 1851 found the Adirondack region of New York State caught between two worlds, suspended in a tension that would prove crucial to understanding the Harwick family's terrible transformation. While cities like Albany and New York were embracing the Industrial Revolution, with steamships churning up the Hudson River and telegraph lines connecting distant communities, the vast wilderness areas remained largely untamed. Home to scattered settlements of trappers, loggers, and families seeking to escape the complications of an increasingly connected society. The Adirondack wilderness in those days stretched for hundreds of square miles of virtually uncharted territory, broken only by ancient Indian trails and the occasional logging camp. It was a landscape that could swallow entire families without trace, where a man might live his entire life without encountering another soul beyond his immediate kin. The mountains rose in endless green waves, their valleys hidden beneath canopies so thick that sunlight rarely reached the forest floor. Streams and lakes lay scattered throughout like jewels in the green darkness, many of them unmapped and unnamed, known only to the native peoples who had hunted these lands for centuries before white settlement. The Harwick family had been among the pioneer settlers who sought refuge in this wilderness, arriving in the region during the harsh winter of 1836. Ezra Harwick had been a man of contradictions from the beginning. Educated and articulate, yet driven by an almost pathological need to escape what he perceived as the corruption of civilized society. Born in Vermont to a family of modest means, he had worked as a school teacher in small towns throughout New England before meeting and marrying Sarah Petton, the daughter of a failed merchant from Connecticut. Sarah brought to the marriage not only her own education, rare for women of her generation, but also a small inheritance that would prove crucial to their frontier ambitions. More importantly, she shared Ezra's growing disillusionment with the rapid changes transforming American society. The couple had witnessed the social upheavals of the 1830s, the financial panics that destroyed honest families overnight, and the growing materialism that seemed to be replacing traditional values. Their decision to seek isolation was not merely practical but philosophical. They believed they could create a purer form of human existence free from the corrupting influences of commerce and social convention. Their chosen location reflected both careful planning and dangerous isolation. The valley they selected lay hidden behind a series of ridges that formed a natural barrier against casual discovery. Access required navigating a treacherous mountain pass that was often impassable during winter months. While the valley itself was small enough to be easily defended, but large enough to support basic agriculture, a clear stream ran through the center, providing fresh water year-round, while the surrounding slopes offered abundant game and timber. For the first several years, the Harwick family represented a remarkable success story of frontier self-sufficiency. Ezra proved surprisingly adaptable to wilderness life, learning hunting and trapping skills that supplemented his basic knowledge of farming. Sarah mastered the complex arts of food preservation, herbal medicine, and the dozens of survival skills necessary for isolated living. Their first child, Benjamin, was born in 1839 during a particularly harsh winter delivered by his father with only Sarah's mother's medical books as guidance. The birth of Benjamin marked a turning point in the family's relationship with the outside world. Ezra became increasingly protective of his growing family, viewing each contact with other settlers as a potential threat to their carefully constructed paradise. When traders or hunters occasionally discovered their hidden valley, Ezra received them with polite but cold hospitality, making it clear that visitors were not welcome to extend their stays. 2 daughters followed Benjamin's birth: Martha in 1841 and Rebecca in 1844. Each birth seemed to deepen Ezra's conviction that his family represented something precious and unique that must be protected from outside contamination. He began developing elaborate theories about the corrupting influence of social contact, arguing to Sarah that their children were growing up pure and natural in ways that civilized children could never achieve. The family's education became a central focus of Ezra's attention. Using the small library of books they had brought from Vermont, he conducted daily lessons that went far beyond basic literacy and mathematics. Benjamin and his sisters were taught philosophy, natural history, and what Ezra called true moral reasoning, a system of ethics based on his own interpretations of natural law rather than traditional religious doctrine. As the children grew, Ezra's teaching methods became increasingly unconventional. He argued that normal language was corrupted by the false concepts of civilization, filled with words and ideas that prevented clear thinking about natural human relationships. He began experimenting with modified vocabulary, eliminating terms that he considered artificially imposed by society, and replacing them with words that he claimed represented more fundamental truths about human nature. The last confirmed contact between the Harwick family and the outside world occurred in the spring of 1847, when Ezra made his final trading expedition to the logging town of Newcomb. The merchant who dealt with him, Jeremiah Foster, later recalled that conversation in detail when questioned by investigators. Ezra had seemed agitated and spoke at length about protecting his family from what he called the contamination of corrupt minds. He purchased unusual supplies, large quantities of salt, metal knives, and several medical texts dealing with anatomy and surgical procedures. Foster remembered being struck by Ezra's changed appearance. The man who had visited his store sporadically over the previous decade had always been thin but healthy, with the weathered look of someone adapted to outdoor life. But in 1847, Ezra appeared gaunt and hollow-eyed with an intensity that made Foster uncomfortable. Most disturbing of all, Ezra seemed to have developed peculiar speech patterns, occasionally using words that Foster didn't recognize and speaking in rhythms that sounded almost foreign. When Foster inquired about the family's welfare, Ezra's response had been chilling in its intensity. He spoke of the great work that he was conducting with his family, a process of purification that would allow them to transcend the limitations imposed by corrupted civilization. He mentioned that his children were learning the true language of natural existence, a form of communication that would allow them to understand reality without the distortions created by artificial social concepts. After that encounter, the Harwick family seemed to vanish entirely from the awareness of the outside world. Trappers and hunters who had occasionally glimpsed smoke from their valley reported seeing nothing for months at a time. Some assumed the family had moved deeper into the wilderness or perhaps returned to civilization. Others wondered if they had fallen victim to the harsh realities of frontier life, disease, accident, or attack by the few hostile native bands that still roamed the deep wilderness. What actually happened during those 4 years of complete isolation would only be pieced together much later through careful analysis of the journals found in their cabin and the painstaking process of learning to communicate with young Benjamin. The transformation that occurred in that remote valley would challenge every assumption about the stability of human nature and the power of isolation to reshape the fundamental structures of consciousness itself. The hunting party that discovered Benjamin consisted of 3 men whose backgrounds would prove crucial to understanding and documenting what they found. James Culver served as both a successful merchant in the growing town of North Creek and an appointed constable responsible